good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, Context is Everything Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading a textbook cover to cover today. The Global Conflict, Allied Success. Yesterday, the Axis powers advance. We left off in the last sentence of the last section was the Axis powers had reached the height of their power and success. So, World War II, the tides turn. Now, thank you. John Michael, Context is Everything Media Network. Please subscribe. Please. Thank you. The Global Conflict, Allied Successes. World War II was fought on a larger scale in more places than any other conflict in history. Civilians as well as soldiers were targets in 1941. This book was published in 2001 for future listeners. In 1941, a reporter visited a Russian town that had become home to 10,000 people before the German invasion. The reporter found a lone survivor. She was a blind old woman who had gone insane. I saw her wandering barefooted around the village, carrying a few dirty rags, a rusty pail, and tattered sheepskin. From 1939 to mid-1942, the Axis ran up a string of successes. The conquerors blasted villages and towns and divided up spoils. Japan, Italy, Germany, Greece, and another one that started with a K, I think. Then, Allies won some key victories. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Occupied lands. New heading. While the Germans rampaged across Europe, the Japanese conquered an empire in Asia and the Pacific. Each set out to build a new order in the occupied lands. Nazi Europe. Hitler's new order grew out of his racial obsessions. He set up puppet governments in Western European countries that were peopled by Aryans or related races. The Slavs of Eastern Europe were considered to be an inferior race. Weren't the Slavs blonde-haired and blue-eyed? They were shoved aside to provide more living space for Germans, whom Hitler considered the ideal race. To the Nazis, occupied lands were an economic resource to be plundered and looted. The Nazis systematically stripped conquered nations of their works of art, factories, and other resources. They sent thousands of Slavs and others to work as slave laborers in German war industries. As resistance movements emerged to fight German tyranny, the Nazis took savage revenge, shooting hostages and torturing prisoners. Nazi genocide. The most savage of Hitler's policies was his new program to kill all people he judged as racially inferior, particularly Jews. Other targets included Slavs, Gypsies, and the mentally ill. At first, the Nazis forced Jews in Poland and other countries to live in ghettos and concentration camps. By 1941, however, German leaders had devised a plan for the final solution of the Jewish problem: the genocide or deliberate murder of all European Jews. To accomplish this goal, Hitler had special death camps built in Poland. I don't know why they put quotation around death camps. That's what they were. They were camps where people were systematically murdered. At places like Auschwitz, Sobibor, and Treblinka. The Nazis shipped Jews from all over occupied Europe to the camps. There, Nazis engineers designed the most efficient means of killing millions of men, women, and children. As Jews reached the camps, they were stripped of their clothes and valuables. Their heads were shaved. Guards separated men from women and children from their parents. The young, old, and sick were targeted for immediate killing. Within a few days, they were herded into shower rooms and gassed. Shower rooms in quotation. That makes sense, right? Shower rooms in quotation because it's not really a shower room. But when they say death camps in quotation, that doesn't make any sense because they were death camps. Why is it in quotation? Just say death camps. Shower rooms in quotation, right, because it's not actually a shower room. It's a gas chamber. Death camp. No, it is a death camp. It's not a death camp. Why did the book say that? I don't get it. Jews resisted the Nazis even though they knew their efforts could not succeed. In October 1944, for example, a group of Jews in Auschwitz death camp destroyed one of the gas chambers. The rebels were killed. One woman, Rosa Rabota, was tortured for days before she was hanged. "Be strong and have courage," she called out to the camp's inmates who were forced by the Nazis to watch her execution. In some cases, friends, neighbors, and strangers protected Jews. Shugihara Chiuin, a Japanese diplomat in Lithuania, saved some 6,000 Jews by writing exit visas until that he was ordered home by Japanese government. Italian peasants hid Jews in their villages, and the nation of Denmark and Bulgaria saved almost all of their Jewish populations. Most often, however, people pretended not to notice what was happening. Some were collaborators, helping Nazis hunt down Jews, or, like the Vichy government in France, shipping tens of thousands of Jews to their death. Whoa. Isn't that the thing that 14-year-old, what's his name? Not Bezos. 14-year-old, the other guy who's got a massive political import. What's his name? I can see his sour face. Massively wealthy. Massively wealthy guy. Lots of political power. Wasn't he part of the roundup of Jewish civilians? Also a Jewish man himself. Kind of odd. But he was. You can look it up. What's his name, though? Forget his name, but you know who I'm talking about. The guy. Lots of political import. Let's see. The scale of savagery of the Holocaust were unequaled in history. The Nazis deliberately set out to destroy Jews for no reason other than their religious and ethnic heritage. Today, the record of that slaughter is a vivid reminder of the monstrous results of racism and intolerance. The co-prosperity sphere. As Japan extended across Asia and the Pacific, it donned a mantle of anti-imperialism. Under the slogan, "Asia for Asians," it created a great East Asia co-prosperity sphere. Japan's self-proclaimed mission was to help Asia escape Western colonial rule. In fact, its real goal was a Japanese empire in Asia. The Japanese treated the Chinese, Filipinos, Malaysians, and other conquered people with great brutality, killing and torturing civilians throughout East and Southeast Asia. People were shot simply for listening to Allied radio broadcasts. The Japanese seized food crops, destroyed cities and towns, and made local people into slave laborers. Whatever welcome the Japanese had at first met as liberators was soon turned to hatred. In the Philippines and Indochina and elsewhere, nationalist groups waged guerrilla warfare against Japanese invaders. New heading. The Allied war effort. So that was the Axis powers. This is the Allied war effort. After the United States entered the war, the Allied leaders met periodically to hammer out their strategy. In 1942, the Big Three, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin, agreed to finish the war in Europe before turning their attention to Asia. From the outset, the Allies distrusted one another. Churchill thought Stalin wanted to dominate Europe. Roosevelt felt Churchill had ambitions to expand British imperial power. Stalin believed that the Western powers wanted to destroy communism. At meetings and in writing, Stalin urged Roosevelt and Churchill to relieve the pressure on Russia by opening a second front in Western Europe. Not until 1944, however, did Britain and the United States make such a move. The British and Americans argued that they did not have the resources before then. Stalin saw the delay as a deliberate policy to weaken the Soviet Union. Total war. Like the Axis powers, the Allies were committed to total war. Democratic governments in the United States and Britain increased their political power. They directed economic resources into the war effort, ordering factories to stop making cars or refrigerators and to turn out airplanes or tanks instead. Governments rationed consumer goods, from shoes to sugar, and regulated prices and wages. On a positive side, while war brought shortages and hardships, it ended the unemployment of the Depression era. I guess this is where they got the idea of the military-industrial complex, because they were like, wait, war creates jobs? War creates jobs, that means that we're making money. Who's paying for all this? Taxes? Wait a minute. You mean that we're diverting taxes into industry that we have control over? Well, this can be beneficial. Military-industrial complex. Very simple, but it goes much deeper than that. Under pressure of war, even democratic governments limited the rights of citizens, censored the press, and used propaganda to win public support for the war. In the United States and Canada, many citizens of Japanese descent lost their jobs, prosperity, and civil rights. Japanese Americans and Japanese Canadians even lost their freedom and were forced into internment camps after governments decided that they were security risk. The British took similar action against German refugees. Some 40 years later, both the United States and Canada apologized for their wartime policy and provided former internees with reparations or pay for damages caused by the imprisonment. Yes, we had internment camps on United States soil during World War II. Women help win the war. As men joined the military, the war industries expanded. Millions of women around the world replaced them in essential jobs. Women built ships and planes, produced munitions, and staffed offices. A popular British song recognized women's contributions. She's the girl that makes the things that drill the holes that hold the spring, that drive the rods that turn the knob, that work the thingamabob. Then that girl that makes the things that hold oil and the oils in rings, that works the thingamabob, that's gonna win the war. Hey! From the People's War, Britain, 1939 to 1945. It's a song. The song took 6 years to write? I don't get it. British and American women served in the armed forces in many auxiliary roles, driving trucks and ambulances, delivering airplanes, decoding messages, and assisting at anti-aircraft sites. In occupied Europe, women fought in the resistance. Marie Fourcade, a French woman, directed 3,000 people in the underground and helped downed Allied pilots escape to safety. I don't get it. I don't know what that means. Many Soviet women played combat roles. Soviet pilot Lily Litvak, or for example, shot down 12 German planes before she herself was killed. What a shame. See, the Marie Fourcade, a French woman, directed 3,000 people in the underground. I don't know what that means. And helped downed Allied pilots escape to safety. Seems like you could write another sentence about that. Turning points. During 1942, write another sentence about it or just don't mention it. It's so vague that it's like, what's the point of mentioning it? I don't get it. Write another sentence about it. I'm not sure what helped downed pilots. Where was she? The underground? You mean the subway? I don't know what that means. Turning points. During 1942 and 1943, the Allies won several victories that turned the tide of battle and pushed back the Axis powers. The first of these turning points came in North America and Italy. El Alamein. In Egypt, the British under General Bernard Montgomery finally stopped Rommel's advancing during the long, fierce battle of El Alamein. Across Libya, they then turned the tables on the Desert Fox, driving the Axis forces back across Libya and Tunisia. I don't know why this book expects me to remember who the Desert Fox is and not just saying the guy's name. But the Desert Fox is somebody that they mentioned. I don't remember who the Desert Fox is, and I don't know why I really should. Say the guy's name. Say the guy's name, not call him the Desert Fox. Let's see who the Desert Fox is. The Desert Fox, WWII. Erwin Rommel. Okay, so they did say his name, but it didn't make it clear that it was him. I didn't get it. Whatever. I don't know, why am I supposed to remember that that's his nickname? Later in 1942, American General Dwight Eisenhower took command of joint Anglo-American forces in Morocco and Algeria. Advancing to Tunisia from the west, he combined with the British forces to trap Rommel, the Desert Fox, his army, which surrendered in May of 1943. Invasions of Italy. Victory in the North Africa let the Allies leap across the Mediterranean into Italy. In July 1943, a combined British and American army landed first in Sicily and then in southern Italy. They defeated the Italian forces there in about a month. Italians, fed up with Mussolini, overthrew Il Duce. Il Duce being Mussolini. I remember that. The new Italian government signed an armistice, but the fighting did not end. Hitler sent German troops to rescue Mussolini and stiffen the will of the Italian fighting in the north. For the next 18 months, the Allies pushed slowly up the Italian peninsula, suffering heavy losses against stiff German resistance. Still, the Italian invasion was a decisive event for the Allies because it weakened Hitler by forcing him to fight on another front. The Red Army resists. Another major turning point in the war occurred when the Soviet Union resisted. After their triumphant advance in 1941, the Germans stalled outside Moscow and Leningrad. In 1942, Hitler launched a new offensive. This time, he aimed for rich oil fields in the south. His troops, however, got only as far as the city of Stalingrad. The Battle of Stalingrad was one of the costliest of the war. Hitler was determined to capture Stalin's namesake city. Stalin was equally determined to defend it. The battle began when the Germans surrounded the city. The Russians then encircled their attackers. As winter closed in, a bitter street-by-street, house-by-house struggle raged. Soldiers fought for 2 weeks for a single building, wrote a German officer. Corpses are strewn across the cellars and the landings of the staircases. That was a bad accent, he said. Trapped without food or ammunition and with no hope of rescue, the German commander finally surrendered in 1943. The battle cost the Germans approximately 300,000 lives, wounded or captured soldiers. What? The battle cost the Germans approximately 300,000 killed, wounded, or captured soldiers. Counterattack. After the Battle of Stalingrad, the Red Army took the offensive and drove the invaders out of the Soviet Union entirely. Hitler's forces suffered irreplaceable losses of both troops and equipment. By early 1944, Soviet troops were advancing into Eastern Europe. Invasions of France. By 1944, the Allies were at last ready to open a second front in Europe with the invasion of France. The Allies were at last ready to open a second front of Europe with the invasion of France. Invading France? France was on the Axis side. They haven't made that glaringly clear. They did say the thing about the French shipping lots of Jews to internment camps. So I guess that does insinuate that they're not on the Allied side. But they haven't talked much about France otherwise. And if they have, I forgot. That's entirely also a possibility. Okay, let's see. General Eisenhower, was Commander Eisenhower. I forget what his title was, but very important. Eisenhower was made the Supreme Allied Commander. Oh, there you go. He and other Allied leaders faced an enormous task of planning the operation and assembling troops and supplies. To prepare the way for the invasion, Allied bombers flew constant missions over Germany. They targeted factories and destroyed aircraft that might be used against the invasion force. They also bombed a number of German cities. The Allies chose June 6, 1944. D-Day, they called it, for the invasion of France. After midnight, Allied planes dropped paratroopers behind enemy lines. Then, at dawn, thousands of ships ferried 176,000 Allied troops across the English Channel. From landing craft, the troops fought their way to shore, amid underwater mines, raking machine gun fire. They clawed their way inland through the tangled hedges of Normandy. Finally, they broke through German defenses and advanced toward Paris. Meanwhile, other Allied forces sailed from Italy to land in southern France. In Paris, French resistance forces rose up against the occupying Germans. Under pressure from all sides, the Germans retreated. On August 25th, the Allies entered Paris. Within a month, all of France was free. Attention focused on conquering Germany itself and defeating Japan. Have a good day. God bless. Bye-bye.